March Madness is about to completely take over the lives of Ole Miss Rebel fans. We need to talk to Daylan Flowers and find out what the students are thinking about Ole Miss sports.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, welcome to the Locked On Ole Miss podcast. I am Steven Willis, the host of your Ole Miss morning show and a very hard-working, if I do say so myself, Ole Miss podcast. We're going to bring in Daylan Flowers to talk about everything that's going on. And the SEC tournament is about to kick off in Nashville, I guess tip-off in Nashville. And listen, the whole SEC is basically in the NCAA tournament. They're talking about 12 out of the 16 teams getting a bid. Coaches are openly saying they don't care about Nashville. They shouldn't care about Nashville. The SEC's kind of gotten too good for Nashville at this point.
Yeah, and that's a hot topic that you honestly talked about a lot, and people have kind of disparaged you for saying it, but it's the truth. You know, John Calipari has basically just come out and said that it doesn't matter. And that's the true standpoint. I think for me, a few weeks ago, I kind of mentioned this to you, but I think this was either right before the Oklahoma game or right after. But it didn't matter if Ole Miss won that Oklahoma game and ended up losing to Tennessee and Florida all combined. They were still positioned to be in the NCAA tournament, and that was the goal this year for Ole Miss. After starting off so hot last year in the first year of Chris Beard's era at Ole Miss, and then in conference play just kind of struggled really badly, was unable to make the tournament last year. That was the goal this year, was just simply make the NCAA tournament. And at that point, Ole Miss was just fighting for seeding positioning, and they've done so far. And might I add, now bringing on top of those 2 points, Steven, beating that Oklahoma team was huge. A team that more than likely is now not going to get in the tournament unless they have a sporadic SEC tournament run. But that Oklahoma team at that time was fighting for their lives to hopefully win out the regular season and poise themselves to be in the NCAA tournament conversation. And then beating Tennessee at home was huge, because that was something, in my opinion, that Ole Miss just kind of lacked, a huge home win at home other than the Kentucky win. And that's something that, in my opinion, set them apart from other teams on their resume. So it was huge. In the Florida game, I just hope Ole Miss learned a lot about what they needed to do moving forward this season and in the future. And when I say that is, Chris Beard has to just take a look at his front court really strongly. And I thought the Florida game was a great example for that. And there have been other games this season, but this front court has to be better for Ole Miss now. It has to be better for Ole Miss moving forward in the future in terms of recruiting in the high school and transfer portal. But this SEC tournament, Ole Miss, they have a chance if they want to is make some history and win the SEC tournament for the, if I'm not mistaken, the first or second time in school history. But at the same time, you also want to think about it in future references. How badly do you want to win this? This is the conference that's as loaded as possibly be. And you also want to scale away this tournament with no injuries when you have a March Madness opportunity moving forward. And that's the ultimate goal here. Malik Diaz said after the huge Alabama win earlier this season that he thought that the ceiling for this Ole Miss team was the Final Four. And I wholeheartedly agree, but you can't do that if you're hurt or you're beat up or you're tired. Moving into that retrospect, this team has the capabilities to shock a lot of people who didn't think that this Ole Miss team would even be in this conversation this year. And here they are. And if they can get scathed out of Nashville healthy, then why not take that chance? Obviously you don't want to just not compete and lose games, but you also have to think of the greater picture here for Ole Miss. And that is, in my opinion, at least making the Sweet 16 in the NCAA tournament this year.
Yeah, which would be equaling the best tournament run in the history of Ole Miss basketball. I mean, there is some still heady things. Ole Miss has won SEC tournaments. In 1981 with Tim Thomas, they won the SEC tournaments. With Marshall Henderson, they won the SEC tournament.
Yeah.
They've done that before. Making to the Sweet 16, that would be a completely special moment. And I think one of the keys in this thing, and I've talked to you about it every time I've had you on, I think for the last couple of weeks, is I think Ole Miss needs to be not only in the NCAA tournament, but in the side of the bracket opposite of the number 1 seed. They need to be on the number 2 seed part of the 16-team bracket.
And that's another pivotal point. I was actually having a conversation with a good buddy about that in the entire sequence. And how important are these position seedings right now for Ole Miss? You look at it in terms of, oh, you maybe wanted to win a couple more games, but then that puts you in a position where you're facing the number 1 or 2 seed in the second round with the opportunity to get knocked out before you even get to the Sweet 16, which ultimately is the goal here. And let me add this point as well, Stephen. It doesn't matter how you get there if you're Ole Miss. It truly doesn't matter. It doesn't matter who you have to be, who's in front of you, whether that's the number 1, number 2 seed or the 5 seed. You just want to get to the Sweet 16 at least and then hope for the best. I think this Ole Miss team has the capabilities of doing that. But then when I think about it, if Ole Miss does get to the Sweet 16, depending on who they face, they have the opportunity to continue moving forward. And that's the goal. But how do you take those little steps to get there? And right now, it doesn't matter how you get there. It doesn't. You look at this Ole Miss team, started off conference play this year, Stephen, 3-0, struggled, kind of ended the season on the 3-game skid before beating Oklahoma. It doesn't matter how Ole Miss got here. It doesn't matter how Ole Miss got to being locked into the NCAA tournament, but they've done it. And they've got to the position where they have the chance to shock a lot of people, because I think for Ole Miss, the national perspective is they haven't been able to consistently put up a showing where they can compete with some of the best teams in the country, which isn't true, but that's the national media talking. And I think that built a chip on this team's shoulders. And I think that's something they want a little bit. I think that these players are hungry. I think that a lot of these guys, Brakefield, Morrell, even Sean Pedulla, who have been around the landscape of this program, who have been around different landscapes of other programs, now understand what the capabilities are, and that's to win, especially when you're under a coach like Chris Beard, who throughout his coaching tenure has done nothing but win every place he's been, Stephen.
Thanks again for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. When we come back, we're going to talk to Daylan about Sean Pedulla getting third-team All-SEC and Maddie Scott getting the Gillum Award. We're going to do a little award season wrap-up when we come back. But first, I do want to let you know this is a message from our sponsor, Intuit TurboTax. Taxes were us waiting and wondering and worrying if you were going to get any money back, and then waiting and wondering and worrying some more. Now taxes are matching with a TurboTax expert who can do your taxes as soon as today. An expert who gives your taxes their undivided attention as they work on your return, while you get real-time updates on their progress so you can focus on your day. An expert who will find you every deduction possible and file every form, every investment, everything with 100% accuracy. All you can do is get the most money back guaranteed. That's a pretty good deal. No waiting, no wondering, no worries. Now, this is what taxes is all about. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com, only available with the TurboTax Live full service, real-time updates only available in the iOS mobile app, and see guaranteed details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. Really cool stuff indeed. So, Daylan, Sean Pedulla got named as a third-team All-SEC player, and I understand this. There's a lot of people that's been very heady towards Florida and Auburn and Alabama and those schools. But I think Pedulla deserved a little bit better than third team, honestly, for what he's meant to this Ole Miss team this season.
Yeah, and you know what's funny about this, Stephen? This selection, the all conference selection from every conference, the coach of the year, it seems a little based in my opinion. And what I mean by that is, how are we selectively determining these things? Because we kind of mentioned about this, but I thought Dennis Gates should have been the coach of the year for the SEC. I know Missouri finished the regular season in a way that they didn't want to, and I know Auburn has dominated the conference and dominated college basketball, and I'm not trying to disadvantage Bruce Pearl. I'm not trying to disadvantage Bruce Pearl at all. But I truly just don't think people understand how big not winning a single conference game was last year and switching this thing around from Missouri. So, and going back to the Sean Pedulla, I thought that, how are they looking at that? You look at guys that were ahead of him, Josh Herbert and Wade Taylor have been the two eye-catching names. In every game that Sean Pedulla played against him, he outplayed them. But, Ole Miss ended up losing those same games. But I thought Sean Pedulla held his ground against those two players. And consistently from the first conference game to the last conference game, Ole Miss ran through Sean Pedulla. And his ability to hit shots, to be a playmaker, to be a vocal leader was evident for Ole Miss this year compared to what maybe have been what may have been lacking for Ole Miss last year. But I don't know what is the true criteria for picking these things. I was grateful that he was even on the third team, because knowing the way that this conference looks and treats Ole Miss, I wouldn't have been surprised if he had not made any of the three teams at all. So I was just grateful for that. But it was definitely a snub for Sean Pedulla. And a point that I just made a little bit earlier, but I hope he uses this as a little bit of motivation, in terms of, oh, you guys think that these two guys are better than me? Then I've got something to prove for you moving forward. I hope he uses the motivation to let you guys know that, first of all, I'm better than these guys. But secondly, one of the key misconceptions about Ole Miss is you can't come here and be a great basketball player. And I think Sean Pedulla has shown that now as a transfer player, but now has the ability to take it to another level in the SEC and the NCAA tournament here coming up soon.
Yeah, I was looking at the stats earlier this week when I was trying to figure out some stuff about the basketball team. Ole Miss has 6 players averaging double figures.
Yep.
And that is obscene.
Yep.
To have 6 players averaging double figures. And that should let everybody know that if this team shoots relatively well against Florida was a horrible matchup to start with. Nobody should be mad about that at all. But Ole Miss, on top of that, did not shoot well, and specifically did not shoot well at the rim. If Ole Miss can clean that up, Florida's getting scared in that ball game. Ole Miss is going to be able to play with them. So that lets me know that the gap between the 1 seeds and the 2 seeds and Ole Miss is not as big of a gap as you might think it would be. And Ole Miss honestly matches up with the 2 seeds pretty well. It looks like Alabama and Tennessee is going to end up on that line. Ole Miss has already beat them.
And this is my opinion, but I've also heard, national journalists say this, that the Ole Miss win going to Tuscaloosa earlier this season was the biggest win for any team in the country. And it wasn't just the way that Ole Miss did it. They completely dominated the number 1 scoring offense in the country at that time on the road. I mean, if you can go back and watch that game, it seemed like Alabama couldn't find any open passing lanes, couldn't get any ability to pass the ball in the post, and they couldn't simply make a shot to get this Ole Miss defense. And on top of that, what was the best thing about that for me is the Ole Miss offense struggled completely in the first half, and they still dominated. I think Alabama had about 10, 15 more shots in the first half that Ole Miss did, and it was still a 2-point game at halftime, and Ole Miss ended up winning that game. I'm not concerned at all about the Florida loss, and neither should Ole Miss fans. That was an opportunity to understand how you compete with a team that has a better front court than you, and Florida simply matched up better than Ole Miss in that position, and that's okay. You look at it even in the Auburn game. Auburn 10 times matches up better than Ole Miss in the front court, but you had a guy like Sean Pedulla who had an amazing game and kept his head on the swivel, and it was a closer game than, in my opinion, I thought was going to be before the game started. So Ole Miss has the ability to compete with any team in the country. Now, how do they do that? Well, first, as we kind of just mentioned, they have to take care of their own game on the offensive side of the ball. When Ole Miss struggles offensively, it's not the end of the world because we've seen it happen. But when they do that and then they have some miscues on the defensive side, then it becomes a problem from Ole Miss. So consistently just taking care of the basketball and finding their own rhythm on offense is huge. We watched Jamin Brakefield take over in the Tennessee game on the offensive side of the ball, which led to a huge win for Ole Miss because they found a compatible partner with Sean Pedulla. That was the case for Malik Dia early in the season. That was the case for Matthew Morrell for a spell. But there hasn't been a guy consistently to go out there and just be a go-getter for a bucket like what to help out Sean Pedulla for Ole Miss. But if they can figure that out, then I'm not concerned about any team that they face, especially in this conference right now.
And switching gears a little bit over to the women's side, Ole Miss is projected to host for the first time since 1994 a game at the games at the Pavilion. What do you think the attendance will be for those games? You have to think a lot of people would turn out because hosting, Ole Miss people go to hosted events.
I think it's going to be huge, man. I think one of the things that simply sets things apart is winning. Coach Yo has done that here at Ole Miss in her time here, and they've won. But the huge hump this year was something that she never necessarily came out and said, but she implied it many times. What was that she wanted to host a regional tournament for the NCAA tournament this year. They have that ability at hand to do so. And you think about it, the rich history that is involved with this Ole Miss women's basketball team, the continued flow and empathetic show of support and love from the fans has been huge this year. At times when it was easy to lose it, there are times that Ole Miss lost some games that, in my personal opinion, I thought the fan disparity was going to lose out very strongly. It did not happen one time. This fan base had continued to believe in this women's basketball team, and they finished the season strong, going to Baton Rouge and winning a huge game, taking care of Mississippi State in the SEC tournament, losing a heartbreaker to Texas. But they've taken care of business to now set this situation up. And I think fans are definitely going to buy into what's happening here if they host a regional tournament. That's huge. That's history for Ole Miss. It's something that hasn't happened in such a long time, as you just mentioned. But I think what also, and I don't want to take a despair from the women's basketball team, but I think this binds into how great Ole Miss athletics is doing in general as well. We talk about the women's team. You know, obviously football has done football, but, you know, Chris Beard now in his second year making NCAA tournament. The baseball team is back surging, and the softball team and track and field and men's golf. All these collections of things are now building into what Coach Yo has wanted to do, which is create a winning environment here at Ole Miss. When she got here, she's been able to do that. And I think the most fascinating thing about this for me is Madison Scott said at her award ceremony for winning the Gillum Award was, you can come to Ole Miss and be a superstar. You can come to Ole Miss and win. You can come to Ole Miss and be a all-American. She's been able to do that. And now with her reputation, now with the great opportunity to host an NCAA regional tournament, when you're a recruit, high school transfer portal, you're looking at Ole Miss strongly. Every recruit is now going to take a position to look at Coach Yo and what she's been able to do here in Oxford, Mississippi, which is absolutely huge for her and her staff.
If I'm not mistaken, Coach O was able to get a recruit for next season out of South Carolina, which
She was
yeah,
a five-star player. I'm going blank on her name right now. I can see her face, but she's a five-star recruit, point guard. She's been at Oxford a few times for a few games, and if you watch her game tape, my goodness, she can handle the crap out of the ball, shoot really well, is very quick on her feet. But it builds to winning. You're not able to do that if you don't win. You're not able to do that if you don't have a winning staff. And I think that's been the great setting point is for people that are maybe not familiar with the Ole Miss women's basketball team. Coach Yo has been one of the best transfer portal coaches in the country over the last 3 years, just like a survey by name Lane Kiffin. She's been able to do that really great and is now developing into her recruiting out of the high school portal really well, which is huge. You just mentioned the South Carolina. South Carolina is the mecca for the number one team in college basketball where Dawn Staley hosts her women's team. So getting a five-star player out of the state of South Carolina is absolutely monumental for Coach Yo and this women's basketball team.
And before we go, Madison Scott won the Gillum Award awarded for the top female basketball player in the state of Mississippi. Madison Scott, if we're going to be honest about it, she should go down as being one of the best Ole Miss Rebels to ever put on a jersey, regardless of sport.
Absolutely. SEC Freshman of the Year, consistently made the SEC All Teams, was a preseason All-American this year. What's funny about this is right before conference play started, I had the chance to talk to her in a press conference, and she simply just looked me dead in the eye. She said, I have not been playing well, and I have to raise my standard, and I have to be better for this team. And she put on. When conference play started, the first two games, she did not look the best. They also ended up losing one of those games to Texas A&M. But from that moment on, she was consistent. I'm dropping 30 points a couple of games, leading the team in scoring in every single one of the last 10 SEC games, if I'm not mistaken. She put on, and it's amazing to sit back and watch it because when you look back at her story coming from Maryland, another recruit that wasn't even from Mississippi, she bought into what Coach Yo was doing. And at that time, wasn't much before when she got here. Those were just coming out the first 2 years that Coach Yo was here. The year before, they had not won a single conference game. They had not made a single NCAA tournament. She was a part of that buy-in. She bought in, and here she is now, an Ole Miss legend. I heard her letters and name will be in the rafters with the other Ole Miss greats one day. But it's been amazing to sit here and just watch her development and take her leadership and kind of implement it in the rest of Ole Miss athletics. But man, just props to Madison Scott, what she's been able to do here. And her journey is not done. I know she wants to eclipse something great in the NCAA tournament for Ole Miss as well.
Thanks again for checking out the Locked On Ole Miss podcast. When we come back, we will turn our attention to the spring sports, softball and baseball, get Daylan's perspective on that. But first, I do want to let you know, Factor makes eating well easy with chef-prepared, dietitian-approved meals that are fresh, never frozen, and ready to heat and eat in just under 2 minutes. With 40 options across 8 dietary preferences every week, you can customize your meals to fit your lifestyles, whether it's Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, or Keto. Plus, Factor even offers wholesome smoothies, breakfast, and grab-and-go snacks to help keep you fueled all day long. I love how Factor takes the stress out of meal planning. I recently tried their Protein Plus meals, and they were packed with flavor and kept me full throughout the day. I got my brother-in-law hooked on Factor as well. The convenience is unbeatable. No prep, no mess, just great food in minutes. Eat smart with Factor. Get started with factormeals.com/LockedOnCollege50 off and use code LockedOnCollege50 off to get 50% off your first box plus free shipping. That's code LockedOnCollege50 off at factormeals.com/LockedOnCollege50 off to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. All right, Daylan, you covered the softball team taking 2 out of 3 from Arkansas in the first ever SEC series at the new park. First of all, tell me about the new park. What was the expectation? How did it go?
It was beautiful, man. Job well done to the athletics program for finally getting done. It's been a long time coming, but it's beautiful, man. The landscape, the video screen, the concession stands, the dugouts, it's beautiful. Ole Miss definitely deserves this. This softball team deserves it. About a 1,200 capacity. It's a nice kind of just turnout for Ole Miss fans as well. It's beautiful. I really do love it, and they've done a great job with the architecture display of it. I love it, and this team deserves it. This is a team that led by head coach Jamie Trashel. They made the NCAA tournament last year, actually, but struggled, had a losing record, got knocked out in the first round. But they look like a completely different team this year, and it's almost kind of compelling and similar to the Ole Miss baseball team. They're now ranked, if I'm not mistaken, 16th. I knew the new rankings came out today where they were ranked 25 before facing the 10th ranked Arkansas Razorbacks this past weekend. Won the series. I know that last game, a lot of people are looking at that margin of loss is something big. I wouldn't take it too much into comparison. This softball team looks really good, Steven. Led by Molly Wachena, who's a freshman pitcher. She leads the nation in strikeouts, actually, and has I believe a .42 ERA currently. She looks phenomenal. And the batting order is taking advantage. Lexi Brady, who has led this Ole Miss team in home runs, is actually top 10 in home runs in Ole Miss history. So they found a stride right now, and I think something that me and my radio broadcast partner were talking a lot about was last year. How much was this softball team even trying to buy into playing as hard as they wanted to, because they were playing in a stadium that was very just iffy to play in, not really excited. Like they seem, if you watch this softball team last year, they seem to have more energy on their road games than they did when they were playing in Oxford. And I solely believe that was because they were playing in a stadium that had no fans in it, wasn't built to play in. And so now that they have this opportunity, I'm seeing just a great energy, a lot of smiling faces, and a team that's ready to compete. Something that's been missing from this softball team for a long time, but it was so exciting to see them take 2 wins against Arkansas, who was a team that just won the SEC tournament and the SEC regular championship just 2 years ago. Arkansas team that's poised to make a NCAA championship run in softball this year. So this was a no slouch for Ole Miss. So to win and start conference playoff strong was huge for Ole Miss.
Does Ole Miss get Oklahoma or Texas this year at home?
They get OU. I can't remember the exact date, but we get OU. So that will definitely be fun to watch. It'll be compelling to see where they match up with the 4-time defending national champions. But it also binds on to bringing that type of atmosphere into this new stadium. There were a lot of Arkansas fans here this past weekend, might I say. It was a great environment. That was speaking as well on, Friday, Saturday night. It was raining, but the fans were still there, still loud, still vocal. So it was a great environment, but they get OU this year. So I'm excited for when the Sooners come to town.
Yeah, I'll definitely be paying attention and at least see the box score watching on that as well. The baseball team, they're hot right now. They're 14-1. Well, actually, by the time people watch this, they might be 15-1 or 14-2 because this is before the South Alabama game. But they're playing pretty well in the early part of the season. And I talked about Mike Bianco deserves a ton of credit.
Yeah,
because after the 2 years to be able to turn this around, because they look like they did before the national champion. Mm-hmm. Everything was ordered, calm, composed, and all that. Not the chaoticness that was the 2023 and 2024 seasons.
And people may hear you say that and say, "Well, what does he deserve credit for?" Well, I told another buddy this while I was at the game this past Saturday for Ole Miss. Simply hiring a pitching coach may have been the greatest thing that Mike Bianco has done in his time here. I can't emphasize that enough. It allows Mike Bianco to not stress about everything, not have to control everything, not to have to worry about everything. Now, foreseeably, he can control and focus on one thing. And for me, that was huge in just terms of being a better defensive team for Ole Miss this year. That's something that completely Ole Miss struggled in last year was defensive fielding. I've seen a great improvement on that side. And it's kind of relaxing from an Ole Miss perspective to see what they're doing defensively, getting ready for conference play here soon. But as well, the pitching looks sustained and it looks obtainable right now for Ole Miss. And it's not just, putting all the pressure on Hunter Elliott, but it's a rotation that has depth right now. It's a rotation that has a lot of quality arms and not just a lot of left-handies, but it has some guys with right hand, guys that can throw a good fastball, guys that can throw a good breaking ball. This looks like a compelled and true and aesthetic team that we have not seen in 3 or 4 years here at Ole Miss. And it's exciting, and I'm really just proud of what they've been able to do so far this year. I know it's gonna stay on task. I actually did an interview with Will Furness, the first baseman of the Ole Miss baseball team, which will be coming out this Sunday. And I could just feel and read and see his energy and just how excited and stoked he was about this year because he felt a different energy for this team this year. And when I saw that on him, I was like, okay, this is a team that may be going places. And they've done that so far. I don't think that Ole Miss fans themselves believe that this team would be where they are right now. And, there have been a few shaky games against some teams that maybe they could have taken care of better, but they won those games. And an ugly win is always better than a pretty loss. So Ole Miss has done some things so far that I did not expect, but it's so valuable to see this baseball team controlling every single level of their game so far.
Thanks again for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast, including YouTube. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Daylan Flowers from the Rebel Walk, from the Daylan Show. What do you got going on this week besides spring break, buddy?
That's about it, man. Well, actually, I'll be doing a lot of recordings for my show as well, but I'm chilling, man. Watching some SEC tournament basketball, other conference tournament games, but just chilling and trying to enjoy my break as best as possible right now.
Yeah, and the thing that, before I get out of here, the thing that drives me crazy, if you hear every school talk about, and this isn't an Ole Miss thing, this is an every school thing, they all cry poor. They all want your $15, $20. They all want everything. And then you look for a conference tournament and they just installed a new $50,000 court for 4 days of a tournament. And it's like,
yeah, let me also put out this thought too. I wouldn't be surprised if the SEC tournament is back in Atlanta in a few years before where it was originally before Nashville, which I'm all for. But I think that it's something that has to be looked at, especially now that coaches are just coming out and saying that they really don't care for the tournament anymore. So it's a fun time to be an SEC team right now. But it's definitely exciting to see what Greg Sankey has to do with moving forward, especially since he's dropping $500K fines on teams and schools. So, let's see what he does moving forward.
That's an expensive test. $50,000 a person that went on that court.
Yeah. I'm going to keep my comments to myself, but I'm not very a big fan of how it's gone down. But as well, it's kind of snaky because you see other schools now kind of charging and changing their seating arrangements and prices for things like that. So we kind of got to buckle down on the way with the schools are being fined, but I can't control all that. So
all right, buddy, we'll see you next week. Thank you very much, and have a good break, bud.
Thank you. Hotty toddy, y'all.